On my 23rd birthday, I was very happy as I announced my engagement to my loving boyfriend. Suddenly, my ruthless grandfather stood up, filled with anger, and slapped me across the face, causing me to fall to the floor and lose consciousness. Everyone was shocked. My parents rushed me to the hospital to save my life. When I opened my eyes in the hospital, I felt intense pain and vowed to seek revenge. After returning home, I gave him a shocking surprise. My name is Maya Collins, and this is the story of how I broke free from the suffocating grip of my grandfather, Albert Collins. At 23, I was on the brink of graduation from Chicago University, yet I often felt like a prisoner in my own life. To the outside world, I was the golden child, the one who always achieved the highest marks and received endless praise. But inside, I was suffocating under the weight of my grandfather's expectations. Albert Collins is a powerful man in his late 70s, and he values reputation and influence above all else. His influence stretches throughout Chicago, and he always made sure our family maintained the image he desired. Growing up, I was conditioned to think that success meant living up to his rigid standards.
It was exhausting.
Remember, Maya, our family's name carries weight. He would remind me, "You have a duty to uphold it." The words echoed in my mind, making me feel trapped. On the eve of my graduation, I found myself sitting in my room, scrolling through my phone. I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. Tomorrow would be a grand celebration, hosted by my grandfather to showcase his beloved granddaughter to Chicago's elite. As I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the anxiety building inside me. Would they all expect me to follow the path he had carved out for me? Would I have the courage to voice my own dreams? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Ethan Blackwell, my secret boyfriend, and the only person who truly understood my struggles. We had been together for nearly a year, hiding our relationship from our families due to the long-standing feud between the Collins and the Blackwells. Albert looked down on Ethan's family, labeling them as lesser, but to me, Ethan was everything I wanted and more. "Hey, are you ready for tomorrow?" he texted. I typed back, "Not really. Just thinking about how Grandpa is going to make this all about him. Just remember, it's your day. You can say what you want." His words gave me a spark of confidence. I wanted to tell everyone about my plans to work with a local nonprofit after graduation, a dream that had taken root in my heart. Helping underserved communities felt like my true calling, far removed from the high-powered corporate job my grandfather envisioned for me. But the thought of facing Albert made my stomach churn. I couldn't imagine his reaction. He had always said that such aspirations were unworthy of the Collins name. Still, I knew deep down that if I ever wanted to find my own path, I had to confront him. The next day arrived with the bright sun shining through my bedroom window. I slipped into my favorite dress, hoping to feel confident as I stepped into the grand hall of our family estate. The place was adorned with elaborate decorations and filled with the laughter of distinguished guests, all eager to toast the golden child. "Amaya, come here." Albert's booming voice interrupted my thoughts as I entered the hall. He was standing beside a group of powerful men, his smile a perfect facade of pride. "Yes, Grandpas," I replied, forcing a smile. "Everyone, this is my granddaughter, Maya. She's about to graduate with honors." He gestured to me as if I were a trophy. The men nodded in approval, but I felt a wave of nausea. I managed to greet the guests while feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice echoing in my head, reminding me to stand tall and make the family proud. As the evening progressed, I found a moment to pull Ethan aside. He looked sharp in his suit, his dark hair perfectly styled. "How are you holding up?" he asked, concern flickering in his eyes. "I'm terrified, Ethan. I want to tell everyone about my plans, but I don't think I can," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You can do this. Just speak from your heart." "I'll be right here," he reassured me, squeezing my hand. With his encouragement, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could share my dreams without letting Albert's opinion crush them. I took a deep breath, feeling the butterflies in my stomach. The moment arrived when my grandfather called for a toast. I stood beside him, my heart racing. To my granddaughter, Maya. May she follow in the footsteps of greatness, he proclaimed, raising his glass high. Everyone cheered, and I felt the pressure build within me. This was it. I had to say something. Thank you, everyone, I began, my voice shaking. I'm excited to graduate, but I want to share something else with you all. I've decided to pursue a career in community service, working with a non-profit organization to help those in need. A hushed silence fell over the room. The guests exchanged bewildered glances, and I spotted the fury rising in Albert's eyes. His face turned a deep shade of red, and I realized the magnitude of my words. Non-profit, he exclaimed, his voice dripping with disdain. What a disgrace to our family name. The anger in his tone pierced through me, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Grandpa, please, I tried to explain, but he cut me off. Enough. You think you can just throw away everything I've built for you? His voice boomed, drowning out the murmurs of the guests. You will not be a failure, Maya. In that moment, everything came crashing down. I had done the unthinkable. I had embarrassed him in front of everyone. He stepped forward, and before I could react, his hand lashed out, striking me across the face. The pain was sharp and sudden, and I stumbled backward, the world spinning around me. As I collapsed to the ground, the noise around me faded. I could hear faint whispers, the chaos of the party blurring into the background. I felt Ethan's hands on me, cradling my head, but I was drifting away. When I finally woke up, I was in a hospital room, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling the air. Ethan sat beside me, worry etched across his face. Maya, can you hear me? He asked, his voice trembling. What happened? I mumbled, trying to sit up but wincing at the pain in my head. You fainted after your grandfather hit you. You've been out for a while, he replied, his voice tight with concern. As the reality of the situation sank in, I realized this was no ordinary family quarrel. This was the moment I had crossed a line. My grandfather's need for control had turned violent, and I had to decide what this meant for my future. I lay back against the pillow, feeling lost. What would happen next? Would I have the courage to break free from Albert's grasp, or would I continue to live in his shadow? The questions swirled in my mind as I drifted back to sleep, unsure of what awaited me. I awoke in the hospital room to the sound of machines beeping and the faint rustle of nurses outside the door. My head throbbed, and for a moment, I was disoriented. Then, the events of the previous evening flooded back. I had announced my dream to work in a nonprofit, only to be struck by my grandfather in a fit of rage. Ethan was still sitting beside me, his expression a mix of worry and relief. Maya, thank God you're awake, he said, reaching for my hand. I was so scared. Ethan, what's going to happen now? I asked, my voice shaky. I could feel the heaviness of the situation pressing down on me. I had crossed a line, and I knew it. You'll need to heal first. Your parents are worried, but they're here for you, he assured me, though I could see the concern in his eyes. And I'm here too. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his hand enveloping mine. His presence was comforting, but I couldn't shake the dread that accompanied the thought of facing my grandfather again. After a few hours, my parents arrived. My mother, Claire, rushed to my side, her face pale. Oh, Maya. We were so worried, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. She embraced me gently, careful not to hurt me. Mom, I'm okay, I reassured her, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. My father, David, stood a bit further back, looking conflicted. How are you feeling? He asked, trying to mask his own worry with a calm demeanor. I'll be fine, Dad. Just shaken up, I replied, glancing at Ethan. He nodded, silently encouraging me to share more. What were you thinking, Maya? Albert's voice echoed in my mind, making my stomach turn. I knew he wouldn't care about my well-being. He would only focus on how I had embarrassed him. As the hours passed, I managed to rest, but my mind raced with thoughts of my grandfather's anger and the implications of my declaration. I was determined to pursue my dreams, but the cost felt heavier than I had anticipated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, The doctor came in. Maya, you've suffered a mild concussion, but you should recover fully. I recommend rest and avoiding stress, he explained. I nodded, but the word stress lingered in my mind. How could I avoid it when my life was tied so closely to Albert's expectations? Later that evening, as I lay in the hospital bed, I received a text from Ethan. I'm bringing you something. Be ready. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a flicker of joy amidst the turmoil. When he arrived, he carried a small bouquet of flowers and a bag of my favorite snacks. Thought you could use some cheer, he said, his smile brightening the room. Thank you, Ethan. You always know how to make me feel better, I said, my heart swelling with gratitude. Have you thought about what you want to do next? He asked gently, setting the flowers on my bedside table. I sighed, looking out the window at the bustling city. I have to stand up to him. I can't let his anger dictate my life anymore. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. But it won't be easy. He won't just let you go. I know, I replied, my resolve hardening. But if I stay silent, I'll lose myself completely. As the days passed, I was discharged from the hospital, but the shadow of Albert loomed over me. The next family gathering was inevitable, and I dreaded the confrontation. I knew I had to prepare myself, both mentally and emotionally. That weekend, my parents hosted a small dinner at our house. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel Albert's disapproval even before he arrived. When he walked through the door, the air grew heavy with tension. Good to see you, Maya, he said coolly, his eyes narrowing. I trust you're feeling better? Yes, Grandpa, I replied, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my stomach. Let's get this over with, he declared, taking his seat at the head of the table. My heart raced as I sat down, glancing at my parents, who looked anxious. Maya, you should consider what's best for the family, he began, launching into his usual rhetoric about reputation and expectations. I have arranged several interviews for you at top firms. They will provide you with a career that suits your potential. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Grandpa, I appreciate it, but I have other plans, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. What do you mean? His tone shifted, curiosity mixing with suspicion. I want to work with a nonprofit organization. I believe I can make a difference there, I stated, determination fueling my words. The table fell silent. My parents exchanged worried glances, and Albert's face turned a shade darker. You think that is worthy of the Collins name? He scoffed. You will not throw away your future for some misguided desire to help people. I'm not throwing anything away, I countered, feeling a surge of defiance. This is my life, and I want to live it on my terms. Albert's expression twisted with anger, and I felt the tension in the room crackle like electricity. You will regret this, he warned, his voice low and threatening. Maybe, but I can't live in your shadow anymore, I shot back, surprising myself with my boldness. The atmosphere was charged, and I could see the fury building in his eyes. In that moment, I realized the depth of my resolve. I was ready to stand my ground, no matter the consequences. As the evening wore on, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I had spoken my truth, and though I knew Albert would fight back, I was no longer afraid. I had crossed a line, but it was a line I was willing to defend. When the dinner ended, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter. My heart raced with uncertainty, but for the first time, I felt the thrill of independence. As I stepped into the unknown, I knew I was finally taking control of my own story. The days following the dinner felt surreal. I had finally confronted my grandfather, and while his anger loomed over me, I felt a newfound sense of freedom. I had stood up for myself, and despite the tension, I knew I had taken the first step toward breaking free from his control. But the aftermath was not as liberating as I had hoped. Albert's wrath was a force to be reckoned with. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ethan. Can we meet? I have something important to discuss. My heart raced as I read his message. I wondered if it was about my grandfather's reaction or something else entirely. We met at our favorite cafe, a cozy little place tucked away from the prying eyes of our families. As I walked in, I spotted Ethan at a corner table, his expression serious. Hey, Maya, he said, gesturing for me to sit down.
Hey, what's going on?
I asked, my stomach nodding with anxiety. He leaned in closer. I heard from my mom that your grandfather is not taking your announcement well. He's been talking to the board members about how to handle you. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean, handle me? Ethan sighed. He's trying to figure out ways to keep you under his thumb. He's even mentioned potentially cutting off your financial support if you don't conform. My heart sank. I had anticipated his threats, but hearing them confirmed made it all the more real. He can't control me like that, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Just be careful, Maya. He won't back down easily, Ethan warned, his brow furrowing with concern. You know how much he values reputation. He'll do anything to protect it. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I couldn't let my grandfather intimidate me, but the thought of losing my financial support was daunting. I needed a plan. Over the next few days, I focused on researching local nonprofits and reaching out to potential employers. I was determined to secure a position that would allow me to break away from Albert's control once and for all. I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. Then one evening, while I was at home, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Can you come over? I have something important to tell you. My heart raced. Was this about Albert? When I arrived at Ethan's house, he was waiting for me with a serious expression. I spoke to my mom about your grandfather, he said, pacing the living room. She told me he's been trying to dig up dirt on you, looking for reasons to discredit your dreams and manipulate you back into his control. What does that even mean? I asked, feeling my anxiety rise. He wants to make it seem like you're unstable or unfit for the life he has planned for you, Ethan replied, his voice tense. He might try to paint you as someone who's throwing their life away. We need to be prepared for anything. The realization struck me like a punch to the gut. My grandfather was willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain his grip on my life. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I won't let him intimidate me. I've come too far to back down now. Ethan nodded, admiration in his eyes. I believe in you, Maya. You're stronger than you think. As we talked, I realized that I needed to take control of my narrative. I decided to publicly share my dreams and ambitions through social media, showcasing the work I wanted to do with a nonprofit. It was time for me to take ownership of my story and stand up to the lies Albert might spread. The next day, I posted about my aspirations, detailing my plans to help underserved communities. I included a heartfelt message about the importance of pursuing one's dreams, no matter the obstacles. I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement as I hit post. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with notifications. Friends and acquaintances began to comment with words of encouragement. The support was overwhelming, and I felt a rush of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this tide against my grandfather. But I knew that Albert wouldn't take my defiance lightly. I braced myself for the storm that was sure to come. As I looked out at the city's skyline, I felt a surge of determination. I was ready to fight for my future, no matter what it took. The aftermath of my press conference felt electric, but I knew the calm wouldn't last long. Albert was furious, and as the days passed, I braced myself for the inevitable storm. Each time my phone buzzed with a message or call, my heart raced with anxiety. What would he say next? What lengths would he go to in order to silence me? One afternoon, I was at home, scrolling through social media, when a breaking news alert caught my eye. Albert Collins denounces granddaughter's nonprofit aspirations. She's throwing her life away. The article was filled with his quotes, laced with disdain and threats. My stomach churned as I read through the comments. Some supportive, but many were scathing, fueled by Albert's influence and reputation. Can you believe this? I said to Ethan when he arrived later. He's trying to destroy my credibility. Ethan sat across from me, his face tight with concern. We need to respond. You can't let him control the narrative. You have to speak your truth again. I nodded, determination flooding my veins. You're right. I can't back down now. The next day, I posted a heartfelt response on social media, addressing Albert's remarks directly. I spoke about my vision, my passion for helping those in need, and my commitment to my chosen path. I refused to let his words define me or my future. The support I received was overwhelming. Friends and strangers alike rallied behind me, sharing my post and encouraging others to do the same. Just when I thought things were starting to settle, Albert called for a family meeting. I knew it was a trap, but I felt compelled to confront him once and for all. When I arrived at the estate, tension hung thick in the air. Albert stood at the head of the table, flanked by my parents, who looked torn between loyalty and concern. "Maya," he began, his voice cold and calculated, "you've embarrassed this family enough. It's time for you to apologize." "I won't apologize for wanting to make a difference, Grandpa," I replied, my voice steady. "You can't dictate my life anymore." His eyes narrowed, and I could feel the anger radiating off him. "You think this is a game? You will regret this rebellion. I've already spoken to influential people who can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat?" I shot back, my heart racing. "You may have power, but you will not silence me. I will not be a pawn in your game." He leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "You'll soon find out that family loyalty is not something to take lightly. I will destroy everything you love if you continue down this path." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I stood my ground. "I'd rather face your threats than continue living a lie. I'm done being controlled by fear." In that moment, I realized how far I had come. I had chosen my path, and no amount of intimidation could change that. I walked out of the meeting, feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, the tides began to shift. Albert's threats began to lose their power. The media and public interest in our family drama started to fade, and I continued to build my nonprofit. I focused on creating positive change in the community, surrounded by people who believed in my vision. One evening, while reviewing plans for an upcoming community event, I received a call from Ethan. "Maya, you won't believe this. Your nonprofit just got a grant." Joy surged through me. "Really? That's amazing." "Yes, this could really help us make a difference." As I celebrated the news with Ethan, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. I was carving out my own destiny, and for the first time, I truly felt free. Months later, at a community gathering, I looked out at the crowd, people from all walks of life coming together for a cause I believed in. In that moment, I knew I had not only reclaimed my life, but had also begun to redefine what it meant to be a Collins. I had faced betrayal and fear, but in the end, I found independence and strength. As I took the stage to speak, I felt ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. I was no longer just the golden child. I was Maya Collins, a woman with a purpose, and I was finally in control of my own story.